Nice to meet you.
Where at the end of the day, we have to entertain everybody.
Yeah, exactly here. So let's we'll do a little stand-up, how about, or sit down, I suppose. Just to kick it off, I'm the interviewer here, so I'd like to, I'm familiar with your work at Kaggle, or as I say it, Kaggle. But I'd love to hear from your words and how it led to you to being in the position that you're at now with Samble.
Brooke and I were talking earlier. I said sometimes people mistake Samble for stumble, which is better than people used to call Kaggle, which sounds like the pelvic floor exercises. So it's a slightly less bad name. Maybe to introduce myself briefly, my background's data science, machine learning. I previously started a company called Kaggle, a large machine learning AI community. That company sold to Google, and then more recently started a company called Samble, and we are a very happy Bright Data customer. So I first got exposed to web data. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of the history of Kaggle. What we did is we took problems from companies and we put them up on the web, and people would compete to build the best algorithm. So as an example, for those of you who are familiar with Zillow, it's a real estate listing website in the US. They put up house price data and offered $1 million prize to anyone who could beat this estimate algorithm, as an example of a prize that we ran. People, the Kaggle community had a voracious appetite for data. We could only launch competitions at a certain cadence. So what we ended up doing was we ended up sort of opening up the platform so that anybody could upload any data set. And the metrics on that product were just extraordinary. This is not well known for those of you who know Kaggle. Actually, it's basically kind of a data set hosting company now. Last time I heard, the metrics on the public data platform were 40x the original product, being the competition platform. And a lot of these data sets are crawled from the web, cleaned up and then shared with the community, and people collaborate on them. And so that was really my first exposure to web data. This new company, Samble, really was built out of just seeing how much people wanted access to nice, clean, usable data sets. One of the challenges with the Kaggle data sets is, you'd have a data set on Yelp ratings, and then you'd have a data set on, MRI scans or something, and they weren't joined up, and you didn't know whether, what was the quality and where was it gotten from. And so what Samble is aiming to do is we're aiming to be a very modern data vendor, crawling, cleaning, structuring data sets, and we're starting off with a focus on go-to-market, data for go-to-market teams, but the idea is to expand beyond go-to-market teams. And so we do a mix of crawling ourselves, buying data from vendors, and then we structure these data sets into a knowledge graph sort of format. So you can take a company, you can see what teams are inside of a company, which people are on those teams, what technologies those companies use, what technologies the different teams in those companies use. Knowledge graphs turn out to be a very rich way to structure data. So that's sort of a bit of an overview, my history with web data and what we're doing with it today.
Yeah, and that leads to my second question here is why now? Effectively the why now question. Is there anything particular about the state of affairs, the lay of the land, the technology landscape that made this the right time for this particular sort of approach?
Totally. So first of all, not very well known, but actually the market for data and information business is $1 trillion. I sometimes joke that Dun Bradstreet might be the ultimate legacy company. I once was told that Abraham Lincoln's first job was at Dun Bradstreet. In fact, I think they might have had two former US presidents have worked for Dun Bradstreet. It's really a very interesting time to be building a data and information business because a lot of these data vendors have many people in low-cost geos sort of manually cleaning data sets. We're a team of 17, and we just leverage LLMs.
Yeah.
So LLMs are very powerful from the perspective of cleaning data and doing so at scale and at a very high quality. And so that massively reduces the cost of producing clean data. Yeah. Then on the flip side, I think the way, and by the way, to be very clear, we haven't cracked the code on this, but we have this strong hypothesis that the way data is consumed is going to be very different as well. It's going to be consumed by agents and LLMs. You want to be able to query and inject context into the context window of an LLM, or into the context window of an LLM that then forms part of an agent workflow. Our bet here is in structuring data in this knowledge graph format. The sort of that's a very nice structure, from an LLM querying perspective. I think, of those two opportunities, we do a great job with the first. I think we are using LLMs everywhere for data cleaning, and I think that piece we feel like is, maybe not totally figured out. There are probably some things we could be doing better than how we are, but I think we're doing a good job on part number one. I don't think we fully. People are excited about MCP. There's sort of a bunch of things in the air. I don't think we fully cracked the code on, the best way to have LLMs query our data. That's a relatively small use case for it at the moment.
Is there any particular reason why? Go-to-market is the first use case here, as opposed to myriad other ones. So it seems like particularly, I wouldn't say difficult. Maybe that's why you chose it as a difficult first case. Because when I look at, you guys scroll and scan job postings and make inferences therefrom. But that's a really shifting landscape. These terms, our head of growth said like 5 years ago you would have been head of marketing, for instance, and so these terms are sort of ever shifting. Are the LLMs particularly predisposed to do better at that than otherwise, or is the go-to-market just a, handy foothold?
It's a great question. When my co-founder and I left Kaggle, we knew we were going to build a data business, a data and information business. We knew we wanted to structure our data like a knowledge graph, and we really did not have it. We were not terribly opinionated on what our starting point would be. We knew we wanted to pick a niche, and then we wanted to expand out from that niche. And what we did was we sort of went industry by industry, or we thought about what are the large use cases for external data, and we sort of started interviewing people on these different verticals. So as an example, one of the early verticals we explored was demand forecasting. And we spoke to the head of demand forecasting at Uber and DoorDash and Walmart and Target. And the thing we learned from that experience was really a lot of the way you predict demand, the most important signals really are sort of internal to the business. New Year's Eve last year for Uber was very big, and therefore New Year's Eve, that will determine a lot of what New Year's Eve will be like next year. Yes, there are external data that matters. For instance, the Aries tour comes to town, and there's going to be a lot of rideshare and DoorDash and so forth activity around that, but it was a relatively small contributor. And so then what we did is, as we were thinking about like where did we start, we would add an additional criteria to our sort of checklist of criteria on a starting point. And so, based on that one, we wanted to find a vertical or a use case where external data was particularly important. And go-to-market certainly ticks that box, because if you're trying to sell to another company, by construction, there's more information about them outside your walls than inside your walls. And we sort of, what we did was we just spoke to as many people as we could, and we sort of started eliminating industries. There were a bunch of things that were very appealing about go-to-market. One is, I think that join keys around data are typically one of, most often the join key is one of four things. It's about businesses, people, products, or places. We wanted to start off with the business join key, because there's sort of a lot of commercial opportunities around the business join key. If you look at another vertical like finance, there are a lot of high-quality vendors. Bloomberg, for instance, is one of the few data vendors that really does have a very high NPS, right? And going from zero to a very compelling product in finance is probably years and years of work. Whereas go-to-market, we felt like although there's a lot of companies, I wouldn't say there's companies at the quality level of the companies that are in finance. Anyway, but that was sort of a bit about our process where we landed on go-to-market as a starting point. I
see, yeah. I'm curious about how you're making a lot of inferences from the data that's available by scraping it and sort of interpreting it so as to make actionable insights, so as to sort of infer that a company's making a particular push on some project or some move or something like that. But I imagine there's a line to be drawn, like there's some sort of greedy interpretation of the data at hand or a more conservative one. And how do you draw the line in that sense? Because again, you're making these inferences from that are not necessarily explicit in the data.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of the very first data source that we went after were job posts, and you'd be amazed at how much you can pull out of a job post, right?
I mean, they're like windows into the company. They can't.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to know what's happening inside Walmart,
Yeah.
they advertise it through their job
Yeah.
posts. They tell you what technologies they're using. They tell you a bit about org structure. You know, the advertising technology group as part of Walmart Global Tech. Okay, therefore I know the advertising technology group exists, and it reports into Walmart Global Tech. I remember, by the way, I was at Google immediately before starting Samble, and Google knew that GCP knew that Walmart was a customer. They also knew that Azure was they're an Azure customer, and they knew AWS was not a customer because Walmart didn't want to put more money into Amazon's pocket, right? But they never really had a very clear sense for what workloads Walmart put on GCP versus Azure. From our data, quick scan of it, it's very clear. The data and analytics workloads are all on GCP, and the web serving workloads are all on Azure, right? We just have this sort of very nice overview picture. Now, there are a lot of challenges extracting intelligence from job posts. I'll just give you one example. A lot of job posts will say, we're looking for people with experience such as AWS, GCP, and Azure, right? Sure. And so that tells you they're interested in a certain class of technology, but doesn't tell you which technology they're actually using. And so there's a lot of I guess nuances in drawing like very clear inferences out of, as you say, data that if you aggregate all the job posts up, some will have the such as, some will have, some will, reference what is explicitly used, and I think we do a reasonable job of, separating out cases like that, for example.
Yeah, and that's probably sort of like accidental over inference that you're successfully avoiding these instances. But I can imagine, I've read these, and I know about this practice of posting effectively phantom, say, job postings. Which may or may not have relevant information in it, but that's almost a form of like counterintelligence in this sense. How would you like factor that in or deal with that?
Yeah, and so something we do and want to get good at is figuring out like what is a real data point and what isn't. We have a customer. This is not exactly the phantom job post problem, but it's a related one. Yeah. We have a customer, Figma, and when they were looking at us and looking at other vendors, one of the things they wanted to see was, do we do an accurate job of their own data? And one big challenge with Figma is a lot of people will say, I am a Figma consultant, and they'll put their employer as Figma on resume sites and so forth. Yeah. And we do a lot of clever things, like, for example, if somebody claims to be a Figma designer in Pakistan, but Figma has never posted a job in Pakistan, we can sort of, largely rule out that they, that they really are a Figma designer, as opposed to somebody who is a contractor who's put Figma as their employer, as an just things like that, and it's part of the magic of this knowledge graph structure. We know where Figma posts jobs, therefore we have a sense for their where their offices are. We have a sense for whether they hire remotely or not, and that allows us to do things like identify who really is an employee and who isn't, as an example.
I can think of this as a very positive use case. I mean, you're effectively sort of lubricating this information to basically seek out companies for what they need. They are making this big change, and you can help companies find a match so as to sell their product more efficiently. Very lovely idea, but I can also imagine, maybe this is a little fringe, but like effectively sort of intelligence on your competitors or whatever. It's effectively like using some sort of sonar to explore the lay of the land for whatever purpose. Have you thought about those implications?
Yeah, totally. I think we aren't used very much, I don't think, for competitive intelligence, but it's certainly a good use case for us. We actually, we did win one customer because we spotted, something else we do, which is kind of cool, is we can see when a new technology is adopted, and a signal of that is all of a sudden a whole lot of people add that as a skill on their LinkedIn, or all of a sudden you see a big increase in job postings for a certain technology. Increasingly we're crawling, what you can see on the client side of a website, right? So we can sort of see when a new technology is adopted reasonably clearly. And we did win a customer because we basically nailed when they signed a very large, one of their largest ever deals, and they really wanted to know when their competitors were signing such deals.
Yeah, right, exactly. I can see this use case being particularly, it's like fun.
Fear is a bigger motivator than opportunity.
Yeah,
often.
exactly, yeah. What was I going to say? But so you guys recently announced a big, strong raise. You're coming out of stealth. You're in go-to-market now. What's next? Coming down the pike.
I mean, actually, even within go-to-market, we're a little bit more niche. We focus on technographic data for go-to-market teams.
Right,
So,
right.
Who's using what technology, who's adopting what technology, who's doing a cloud migration, things like that. We think that there's a fair bit of market still. The way we plan to build this business, I think of building a company a little like a video game. You get to level 1, and if you do well at level 1, you get the right to level 2, right? And for us, level 1 is, being the leading technographic data vendor for technographic data, which we have not achieved yet. So we are definitely not we have not earned the right to level 2. Level 2 for us will be being sort of more broadly a general go-to-market data vendor, and then level 3 is world domination.
Yeah, great, yeah. Well, I can imagine, just extrapolating from you're talking about. I mean, we're just discovering latent facts and latent information in the publicly available data. Is that the particular philosophy, or what's the sort of guiding philosophy behind this? Is it a sort of open market vision or something else entirely?
For now, we started with web data. I think most likely, I don't think we're particularly opinionated on where we get data. We care a lot about providing the richest signals that we can, or the richest data that we can, in a sort of powerful, composable way. And so, for now, we mostly are relying on web data, but we in the future will be very interested in licensing data, in co-op arrangements with our customers. We're just too small and too immature to have really explored anything beyond web data. And then I think the opportunities with web data are still, there's still so much untapped opportunity that we haven't touched yet.
I mean, presumably you're looking at just text data, but there's massive amounts of multimodal data out there in principle that one could use. Well, great. That's all the questions that I have, unless you have more to chat. I'd like to thank our speaker, Anthony.